The Joe Rogan Experience has seen it all. UFO whistleblowers, government secrets, near-death trips, and the kind of stories that make you pause and actually think. With thousands of hours of conversations and no filter in sight, some of the wildest, funniest, and most mind-bending moments in podcast history have happened right here. So buckle up, because we're going to explore some of the craziest stories ever told on the Joe Rogan podcast. In this clip, Joe and physicist Lawrence Krauss talk about how the universe works, how weird reality really is, and why most of us don't fully understand what's going on.
What about the ideas that the universe is in a constant state of contraction
No,
and
it isn't.
expansion?
No? Well, I mean, some
That's
people
been
think
abandoned?
that. No, it's not been abandoned. Some physicists still argue that there's a cycle because it
Right.
looks nice. And they are,
okay.
but I think most people, I mean, there's some people who are arguing for that.
Do you think they're just trying to tie up something neat?
Well, I think they're trying to tie up their ignorance in something that isn't any more plausible than the picture that it expands forever. And as far as we can tell, the most likely possibility is that our universe will expand forever. But to make you a little bit happier, it's quite possible. The best pictures that we have of the early universe is that our universe isn't unique, isn't alone. That there are many universes. We call it a multiverse, and that at any instant in time, in kind of a cosmic super time, there's always a universe being born. So that multiverse might be infinite and eternal.
Where are they?
Outside of our universe.
How's that even possible?
Of course, it's possible.
I understand. I'm not questioning it.
Okay,
I just would like you to define it.
Well, first of all, the simplest possibility is that they're outside the region we can see, right? For example, the edges of our visible universe, space is expanding faster away from us than light. Because, we taught you in school nothing can travel faster than light. You may remember that from school.
Right.
We lied. Oh. Okay. Well, no, you have to parse it more carefully like a lawyer. Nothing can travel through space faster than light, but space can do whatever the hell it wants. So locally, as I told you, the radio host is at rest. They're not moving, and the other end of the galaxy, at the other end of the visible universe, and we're at rest. But the space between us is expanding, so that galaxy, like a surfer, is being carried away from us faster than light. Relative to the water, the surfer isn't moving, right? But relative to the shore, the surfer is, right?
Right.
Okay, so this galaxy is not moving relative to its local surroundings, but it's moving away from us faster than light. And like a surfer in an undertow, they can swim really fast in the water, but if the water's moving away from the shore, they'll never make it back to the shore, right? And so that galaxy, the light from that galaxy is traveling through space at the speed of light, but if the space in between us and the galaxy is moving faster than light, then the poor light can never make it to us. We call that a horizon.
Wow. So the space is traveling too far for the light to reach us. So
Too fast.
Space is
too
fast.
So this light can't catch up with the expansion of space, and it never gets to us. And that galaxy disappears from our causal horizon, we call it. We'll never be able to see it. We'll never be able to interact with it. We'll never be, okay? And it could be that there are different regions so far away from us where space is expanding faster than light, which have a very different history than our own. So space could be infinite. Just our simple space that we know of and love could be infinite in extent, and different regions of that space had different histories. And some of those regions, everything we can see, we know emerged from a single point. Okay? We can tell that. We can tell that by measuring the Big Bang expansion of everything we see and working backwards. And the universe, our visible universe, was once smaller and smaller and smaller. If we go back in time, we can actually follow the laws of physics back to the earliest moments of the Big Bang until those laws break down, and we can make predictions about what the universe should look like. All those predictions agree exactly with the observations we make, which tell us that picture works. But another region, if you wish, could have come from a different Big Bang.
But is that another universe, or is it a part of the universe that we can't see?
Here's how we've changed. And this is semantics, but non-trivial semantics. Namely, when I was a kid, universe meant everything.
Everything, right.
But we say that's a pretty stupid definition. A better definition is an operational one. Universe means that region of space with which at one time we could have communicated, or one time in the future, even if the future is infinite, we might communicate with. Because that describes the region of space where cause and effect works.
Some measurable distance.
Yes. And so we think of a universe as that region which could, throughout which everything could affect everything else, ultimately, in an infinitely long time. And in that picture, universes can be restricted in size. And then other regions which could never have affected us and which will never affect us in the future, we call other universes.
Ah, I see.
And now there are many different versions of a multiverse, but that's the simplest version. And this picture we call inflation, which I just did 2 little clips associated with the new book. One was for a publisher and one was for Big Think. One is the universe in under 2 minutes. So you can look up online, look for Lawrence Krauss Explains the Universe in Under 2 Minutes, where I talk about this cosmic expansion and how it might mean there's a multiverse. But the other is I explain the universe in terms of this beer bottle that I talked about to you earlier. So that's a video. You can watch that. But this theory of inflation, which actually says our universe, the qualities that we see of our universe can best be explained if some early time in the history of the universe, when it was a billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a second old, it had a huge expansion suddenly and increased in size by 30 orders of magnitude in size in a billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a second, which is, by the way, particle physics suggests is highly plausible, even though, okay, and then it would produce a universe that looks more or less like we look like, and it's right now the only explanation of how that would cause the universe to look like what it looks like. But the neat thing about inflation is it's eternal. So inflation, that puffing up, ended in our universe, and then boom, a hot big bang followed it. Okay, so the universe puffed up by a huge amount, then all of that energy, which was stored in empty space, got released, like in the beer bottle, and we got a hot big bang, and the rest is history. But that's locally. But somewhere else, between us and there, space is still expanding exponentially, and faster and faster and faster, and only maybe somewhere else today, boom, like an ice crystal forming, boom, that region of space is suddenly left inflation. And maybe a gazillion years in the future, there'll be another region of space that's expanding away from us so much faster than light, so we'll never know about it, where suddenly that region leaves inflation, and boom, another hot big bang happens. And it turns out in each of those hot big bangs, after the inflation ends, depending upon how it ends, the laws of physics could be different in that universe. And so we tend to think it's quite likely that there are many, many separate regions of space, and in fact it's eternal. So such regions are forming eternally for all time. And there are hot big bangs happening in many regions. And the properties of each of those regions, whether they're conducive to forming galaxies and stars and planets and people, may be different. So we could say, logically in that picture, that the reason the universe looks like the way it does is because we're here to measure it.
Oh my God, we should leave it at that.
Okay.
We should close with that. That is the mind blower of mind blowers.
Good.
In the next clip, the Sober October guys share stories about moments they almost died, and what those experiences made them think about life and death.
Multiple ocean scares now. Like the ones where you're like
crying on the beach.
Well,
No one
no,
knows
just
why.
that like in the moment,
Yeah.
I keep telling myself, don't panic, don't panic, don't panic, you know? And one I remember was in Hawaii where we rented a Jeep and we were like, we want to go see something, you know? So they tell you, oh, take this road. And it takes you to this single road that goes up where there used to be volcanoes. And we come up on this beach. And they had mentioned the beach, but not really too much about it. And so when we parked, I was like, I love the ocean water. I'm going to get in the ocean, you know? So I get in the ocean, and I remember that going in, the beach into the water was a decline, right? So like you go down. And I was just like knee deep in there about to, and I was like, man, this current is pulling back hard, like really hard. And I kind of take like a step back, and I feel myself going further down a decline into the ocean, right? And when I decide to get out, I have to really push hard, like all legs, like boom, boom, like run, like you're running up a hill to get out. And I was like, that was fucking.
If a wave hit you there,
that was
you're
kind of.
fucked.
That was
There was
kind
that
of
guy who was a
scary.
WWE wrestler.
They tell me though when I get back to the hotel, I go, yeah, we took it. I go that beach was a little scary. They go, did you get in the water? And I go, yeah. And they go, oh, you can't get in that water. Like, you'll drown in that water. No one. Did you notice there was nobody swimming there? I go, yeah, I noticed.
I thought it was
But I thought I found a fucking,
Oasis.
and
They
they're
don't
like,
tell you?
They didn't tell me. They're like, do not swim in that water. They're like, you can't swim out of that. If you would, they're like, if you had swam 10 feet in, they're like, you're just gone.
Oh my God.
And like the panic you feel, especially in retrospect, because you remember the feeling of being like, I think I'm stuck here. I think I'm stuck right now.
Fitzsimmons saved a lady in Thailand.
Really?
What?
Yeah, someone was drowning, and Fitzsimmons swam out and saved them.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Thailand. Somewhere crazy like that. Yeah, he was on vacation. I might have made up Thailand.
It doesn't sound like a place Fitzsimmons would go.
Thailand. No, he would go. He's a world traveler.
No, he's a Hawaii guy. He
like-
surfs in Hawaii.
Wherever it was.
What?
Fitzsimmons went in the ocean and saved a lady.
No shit.
Yeah.
I saw my dad save a lady.
That's a scary
in a
thing.
resort. It was at the bottom of the pool. She was just laying at the bottom of the pool.
Oh my God.
When I was like 9 years old, it was like father son. He took me to this resort, and there's a slide. You ever go on a slide where the water that comes off the slide, that like, so in other words, like when you hit the water, it's like high impact. You're like,
Yes.
holy shit, and it pushes you down. I'm 9 years old, so this is many years ago, and I remember like I could swim. I was on swim team like as a little kid, but I remember being like, fuck. That is powerful. Like it pushes you down, right? And you just swim up, and people are, at the resort, and then look down, and my dad swims to the bottom of the pool, and pulls up this lifeless body, and then they do CPR, and she came back.
Oh,
Shut up.
Yeah, and they would write letters to our house for years.
shit.
Really? She was 19.
Oh my God.
She wasn't a little kid.
Did you see the guy,
Oh my God.
the snowboarder upside down when the random skier comes by?
Yes.
Just sees a
Yes.
snowboard sticking this far out of the snow.
Yeah.
Is this the
with
one
2
where
feet.
And the guy was buried under the
Yeah.
snow.
He goes, what the fuck? He stops,
He
goes up
saved
there.
the guy's life randomly.
Is this separate? Have you seen the footage where the guy's wearing the GoPro?
I've seen that.
Right? And then he's like,
falls
fuck,
into the
and
ditch.
into like a hole.
Yeah.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
like-
Yeah.
That is visceral, that feeling.
Oh my
You're like,
God.
And then he's just like, we'll see what happens.
Obviously, he got out because there's footage.
Yeah.
But when you're watching that, you're like, oh my God, you could just fall in there forever. And apparently, that's something that happens.
Tree wells?
That's something that happens. So this
Oh.
guy just falls, and then watch this.
bro.
What?
I know Bert's feeling this.
No, I've had a
Dude.
couple experiences like this.
He manages to stop himself.
Yeah.
What
Bro.
the fuck? How the
Bro.
fuck do you get out of that?
How the fuck do you get out of that?
Fuck the skis.
How
So
did he get out of that?
It's over, Joe.
But no, he's
No, no.
out.
They had to. I think I've read about this. They had to get search and rescue. He had to hang out down there for a while. Search and rescue had to come up and.
Holy
I'm thinking
shit,
of getting
he's
one of those
so
GPS
lucky.
trackers
Do you
to
see
see it.
though?
So-
He's
how
so lucky that he
kept-
stopped right there.
But the way he right here, he's not flailing. He's
Yeah.
like putting his arm and his ski out to try to like. So this guy was able to keep some composure as this was happening, which
would've
is like
bombed it.
kind of the craziest part.
Oh my God. So this is the snowboarder that's buried upside down. So this guy
No.
just sees that little blue piece.
Bro.
Just randomly.
This happened to me.
Skied right over him.
Yeah, he easily
Happened
could have
to take
missed that.
Yeah, could have gone
Dude.
the other way.
There's not much blue.
Soft snow. He's in a tree well, is what it is.
Yeah.
So the tree wells, it's really soft snow. So if you get stuck in a tree well, you are fucking dead. A lot of people die in tree wells.
God damn.
Yeah, I'm thinking of getting one of those GPS things.
So
O'Neill's
when
does- he has one.
we went snowboarding in Matterhorn,
Yeah.
heli skiing, and the guy put a beacon on us. And the first thing he said, he puts a beacon. It's like 4 feet of powder, and he says, "This is so we can find the body." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "You might
This is
fall into a crevasse or an avalanche, so we put the beacon on to find the body."
Whoa.
That feeling, this happened to me. That feeling is terrifying.
This guy's like, thank you.
Good. I'll get you out of here in a sec, okay?
He was dead.
panic. The panic.
He knew he was
I'm
dead
feeling
too.
panic watching
The
this.
knew
panic.
he
So
was
what
dead.
happens is, like what happened to me when we were heli skiing, is I fell face forward in powder. I'd never snowboarding in powder. 4 feet of powder is very different than snowboarding. It's like you have to have your bindings reset. You have to really know how to ride the powder, and I could not turn right. And the guy told me, he's like, "Don't go within 5 feet of my tracks. Stay within my tracks." So the whole time, I can only turn left because at the time I really wasn't that good of a snowboarder, but I could snowboard, but not in powder. And so he's going like this, and all I can do is go left, and I'm just going off the track.
Oh no.
And I'm fucking panicking. But by the way, we're at like 13,000 feet, 14,000 feet. It's very little oxygen. I'm gassed. I'm fat. I'm hungover. It's the day after the national championship that we went to. So we'd eaten edibles. It was like
the day after that?
It was the day after that. I flew to Switzerland and immediately landed and went hella skiing.
I don't remember that.
And so, no. When we went to Florida State versus Alabama.
Oh, 2013.
Yeah, 2013. So all of a sudden I go to cut right, and I catch my nose, and I fucking go face first in the snow. And at first I'm like, fine. I push my arms in, and they just do not touch anything. It just goes like this. And now snow's impacted on my face, so I can't really breathe. And I'm first of all, I deal with panic, but panic kicks in immediately, and I'm like, this is why I have the fucking beacon on. And so I try to clear the snow out of my face, but I'm like pulling all the muscles in my back, trying to turn over. And then the guy just comes up behind me, grabs me on the back, flips me over, and he goes, "You should see your sound guy." My sound guy's upside down, skis kicking, upside down in the snow. And we just got the fuck out. We got on a helicopter and got the fuck out.
In the next video, Graham Hancock explains why the Amazon might hold evidence of ancient advanced civilizations, and why mainstream science doesn't want to admit it.
The more fascinating pieces of evidence in South America have come out recently about these channels and pathways that they've found in the Amazon that could not have been created any other way but by humans creating irrigation, humans creating, like, it appears like grids, like a city grid.
Definitely. The Amazon is a colossal mystery, and it's one of the subjects that I explore in depth in America before. First of all, to give some basic figures, the Amazon basin is huge. The Amazon basin is 7 million square kilometers in area. And within it, 5.5 million square kilometers remains almost entirely unstudied by archaeologists. And that's the 5.5 million square kilometers that is still covered by dense rainforest. And to put that into perspective, 5.5 million square kilometers is the size of the entire Indian subcontinent. So it's like saying, we've done world archaeology, but we've just ignored India, you know. We've done world archaeology, but we've just ignored the Amazon. It's the same argument. 5.5 million square kilometers. The view was, again, there was a dogma. There was a preconception. Human beings couldn't have flourished in the Amazon. It's not a resource-rich area. The soils are poor. It's a difficult area, challenging to get to, very far from the Bering Straits. So the view was that humans hadn't entered the Amazon until about 1,000 years ago. And then gradually, little by little, that view has begun to change. And it's begun to change because of the tragic clearances of the Amazon, because the Amazon rainforest is literally being cut down and turned into soybean farms and cattle ranches. And in that cutting down process has emerged things that shouldn't be there at all. For example, evidence that large cities flourished in the Amazon, enormous cities, which were larger than there was a Spanish explorer who went down the Amazon River system in 1541 to 1542. He was the first European to cross the entire length of South America from west to east along the Amazon. He reported seeing incredible cities, advanced arts and crafts, millions of people, a thriving culture. And 100 years later, when other Europeans got into the Amazon, they couldn't find these cities. So they said, Francisco Orellana, that was his name, made it all up. It was just a fantasy. And then in the last decade, as the clearances of the Amazon have proceeded, we've begun to see the traces of those cities. What happened was that the Spaniards brought smallpox into the Amazon. Smallpox devastated the local population because there was no immunity to it. There was a massive die-off. The cities were deserted. Within 50 years, they were completely overgrown by the jungle, and that's why they were not seen by the explorers who came in 100 years later. But now the jungle's being cleared, those cities are emerging, and we can say that a city like London, which had a population of roughly 50,000 in the 16th century, there were cities of that size all over the Amazon. Wow. Huge numbers of them. And a possible total population of the Amazon that exceeded 20 million people.
What?
Yes, 20 million. This is the latest evidence from the Amazon. And then you ask yourself, how did they do that? How did they feed 20 million people in the Amazon? Because it's a fact, rainforest soils are poor. It's one of the reasons these soybean farms are a really stupid idea, because once you clear the rainforest, the land is largely unfertile and you can't grow stuff on it for very long. So how did they feed all these people? The answer was, they invented a soil. And that soil has a name. It's called terra preta. Archaeologists refer to it as Amazonian dark earths or Amazonian black earth. It's a man-made soil. It's thousands of years old. It's full of microbes that are not found in adjoining soil. It's based around biochar. And you can take a handful of 8,000-year-old terra preta and you can add it to barren soil, and that soil will instantly become fertile. It's highly sought after in the Amazon, and it explains how they fed these people. There was science in the Amazon.
How did they create this?
Well, this is something that's not understood. It's still not understood by soil experts to this day as to how that was done, but it's one of many intriguing pieces of evidence of much higher development in the Amazon that it has been given credit for, and of a kind of science in the Amazon.
Jamie's got an image of it up there. So this is it?
This is terra preta, yeah. Exactly,
wow.
Exactly. And
so was that done by burns? Did they use controlled burns?
They did. One way that it was achieved was to do wet burning. Of middens. They would be burned and smolder. They wouldn't burn fiercely, which just produces charcoal. They would burn and smolder, and that what is called biochar would result, and that's part of the fertility of the soil. But the mystery is the microbial content of this soil, which is completely different from the microbes in neighboring soils, and that remains unexplained.
So, what are the theories? Composting, some sort of advanced composting?
Yes, some sort of advanced composting. But again, what has not been explained is the microbial content of these soils. So there, first of all, is an issue of how two things: how large populations get fed in the Amazon, and evidence that there was a culture in the Amazon that was capable of manipulating the environment in such a way that it could support large populations with the invention of terra preta. Secondly, new evidence, previously not recognized, the Amazon is basically a garden. The Amazon is a man-made rainforest. There are certain trees like Brazil nut trees or the ice cream bean tree, which are food crops, which are very, very valuable, and they dominate the tree regime in the Amazon. They're what's referred to as hyperdominant species. In other words, people living in the Amazon over thousands of years selected certain trees, which they then cultivated and grew. So the whole thing is not simply a wild, pristine rainforest. It's a very ancient man-made environment. And emerging from that man-made environment, as well as evidence of large cities, large populations, and this mysterious dark earth, are huge geometrical structures. And again, I go into this at length in America before because I love this mystery. We have in the UK structures that are called henges. I live in the city of Bath, and about 30 miles away there's a beautiful site called Avebury and another more famous site called Stonehenge. And what a henge is a ditch which has been dug deep, and then an embankment has been pushed up outside the ditch. When people first saw these structures, they wondered if they'd been built for defense. But then it became obvious they hadn't been built for defense, because if you want to create a moat, you put it outside your embankment, not inside your embankment. So a henge is an earthwork which consists of a deep moat with a large embankment outside it, and it can be circular, it can be square, and in the UK and other parts of Europe it often contains stone circles, megalithic stone circles as well, but the henge itself is entirely an earthwork. What we find in the Amazon are thousands of henges that are now beginning to emerge from the cleared area of the jungle, and others that have been identified for the first time with LiDAR. LiDAR technology is being employed in the Amazon. It's non-destructive. You can see what's under the trees.
What is LiDAR?
Light imaging and detective radar. They bounce laser beams down into the jungle. There's a whole pattern of them. You need helicopters, and but it doesn't damage the rainforest. And you can strip away and see what's there. If this isn't too much of a diversion, let me give you the example of Guatemala. Guatemala is a small country. If I remember correctly, it's not much more than 100,000 square kilometers in size. It is filled with intriguing Mayan ruins. Everybody has heard of Tikal. What archaeologists didn't know was that literally within walking distance of Tikal, surrounding that whole area were more than 60,000 structures that they hadn't identified. And these have all been identified by LiDAR in a country that's just 100,000 kilometers in area. So you have to ask yourself, in that 5.5 million square kilometers of the Amazon, if LiDAR technology could be applied comprehensively, what would we find beneath there? And the evidence already is extremely tempting and extremely tantalizing. And I'm intrigued by these huge geometrical figures, which involve primarily circles and squares. And they are classic henges in the sense that they are deep ditches surrounded by huge embankments. They're extremely geometrical. For example, you can find an octagon surrounding a square. At a place called Jacossá in the Amazon, you can find a square perfectly enclosing a circle. Now, that is an exercise called squaring the circle that our academics have given to the Greeks. They said the Greeks were the first people who performed that exercise. But now we find in dated sites in the Amazon that this was being done in the Amazon long before the Greeks.
What are the dates?
The earliest dates that have been found in these sites now are about 3,500 years old. About 3,500 years old. But the evidence is that the sites have been constantly remade. And what intrigues me is what remains in that 5.5 million square kilometers that has not been investigated yet. We are just, I think, looking at the edges of a mystery. The archaeologists involved, who are mainly from Finland and also from Brazil, feel the same. Their estimate is that there are thousands of these structures remaining in the jungle, and they're open as to how old they may ultimately prove to be. The investigation needs to be done. But what's fascinating about them is this very powerful geometry and astronomy. So a number of the sites are perfectly aligned to true north, true south, true east, and true west. I'm not talking about magnetic north. I'm talking about true astronomical north. To do that, there's only one way to do it, and that's with astronomy. So that tells us that astronomers were at work in the Amazon. The geometry is very complex and very precise. That tells us that people with geometrical skills were at work in the Amazon. And thirdly, the scale of the sites of hundreds of meters, gigantic earthworks on the scale of hundreds of meters, tells us that this was highly organized project that was undertaken on a very large scale by very large numbers of people. It's a wonderful mystery, and it deserves much further attention. And that's Jacossá, exactly, the squares, squaring the circle. So you can see the outside embankment, and then inside it is the square ditch, and then there's another embankment inside that, and a circle inside that.
It's crazy that they made a road right through that. What
well,
assholes.
A modern road, yeah, because there's no respect for for the ancient world, unfortunately.
And there's another one. Look at that! Wow, that's incredible.
So there are thousands of these things.
How they found the stuff that they found in the Amazon? What imaging technology were they using to find all this?
Initially, it was entirely found because areas of the rainforest had been cleared. Economic interests said, we want to make a cattle ranch here, or we want to make a soybean farm here. So we're just going to clear the rainforest. In the process of clearing the rainforest, they start discovering these earthworks that had previously been completely overgrown by the jungle. Then the next step was to say, what could we do to find out more about this? Obviously, they don't want to destroy more jungle, and luckily we have a technology which is LiDAR, as I mentioned, which uses radar. And using LiDAR, they've been able to identify many more of these sites, and then to get to the sites without destroying the jungle, and to begin excavations on them, and to find that they go back, in the cases of the ones that have been explored so far, at least 3,000 years. This is an intriguing development, completely unexplained in our understanding of the Amazon. And what it suggests is a heritage of extremely ancient knowledge. You don't wake up one morning and create a perfectly geometrical square or circular earthwork that's perfectly aligned to true north, south, east, and west on an enormous scale. There has to be a background to that. There has to be a reason for doing it. And the evidence is none of these sites were lived in. There's no habitation refuse found in them whatsoever. We don't know what they were used for. I make the case in America before that they're connected to a system of ideas which is found all around the world, which is to do with death and the afterlife destiny of the soul.
In the next clip, former CIA agent Mike Baker breaks down what China is planning for the year 2049 and what it could mean for the future of global power.
I'm very excited to talk to you because I had a guy on, Jamie Metzel yesterday, a scientist who scared the shit out of me, talking about China. He's talking about China. We were talking about China amassing naval power, China's taking over tech companies, and how huge they're getting and how much influence they have over their people as opposed to the way we do it.
Well, he's not wrong.
No.
He's not, I can't spot the lie in what you just said, but I mean, look, there's so much we can talk about, but if you think about it, just in the past handful of months, there was this SolarWinds hack, right, by the Russians. So the Russians go in, they hack into a company called SolarWinds. That is an IT management software company that happens to be fairly deep into government organizations, agencies, Treasury, and a variety of others throughout the U.S. government. And they're also into parts of the intel community, Defense Department, and a lot of commercial sectors. So anyway, the Russians figure this out. Now, around about December or January, Microsoft, identified this as a problem. And I think it was the head of Microsoft said, this looks like the most sophisticated attack we've ever seen. So this is December, January timeframe. And they're still trying to figure out the depth of this hack by Russians. At the same time, and going back months and months and months and months before, the Chinese had been engaged in a more sophisticated attack that, while everyone is focused on what's going on and so fully aware that we got problems, right, from nation states out there who don't like us, everybody's talking about SolarWinds, and now it's they've just now released information about the Chinese attack against Microsoft Exchange servers, running the Exchange email systems, and this thing is enormous. And so the Chinese, we've been so focused for 4 years on the Russians, and they're out there to cause us all sorts of problems. So we should be focused on them. But it's China that's the biggest problem. And so this guy is absolutely right. Jamie's right.
It was terrifying.
Yeah.
Listen to what he was talking about, the way he was explaining how they have this plan. I think he said 2049 to be the global superpower of the world and essentially take the place of what America used to be.
Yeah,
they do it their way.
And they do it their way, which means we're going to bypass all the costs and the heavy lift of research and development over the years, and we're just going to steal everything. Yeah. And they've been doing it for decades. So people think, oh, China, it's a problem. We've talked about this before. Yeah. This idea that perhaps this is just something relatively new, or it's popped up during the previous administration of Trump. And honest God's truth is it's been going on for decades. And they decided that that's how they're going to get to the top of the food chain, is by stealing shit, because it's a lot easier to hoover up everything and then reverse engineer it. And the technology has made it even easier, right? It used to be old school. They'd go out and recruit somebody. They'd find some Chinese American working for a company here in the States. They'd appeal to sort of, you got to help the motherland, and they would. And that was the old school way of doing it. But, cyber theft it's incredible what they're able to do. And this latest attack, well, they're still trying to sort out the mess, right?
So when they do this, so if they get into this email server, are they targeting anything specific? Is there specific companies? Are they just like throwing a net out there and seeing what they catch?
Yes, is the answer to both of those. It looks like what happened here was that their initial point of attack, or the initial focus, was intelligence, right? So then it branched out, and it branched out very, very quickly, right, to hit everything, small companies, medium-sized companies. And that's kind of the MO for the Chinese. The Chinese regime, right, their intel operations, they've got this long vision. And they've also got the resources, and they've got the desire to hoover up everything and then sort it out later. We take, as a country, we take a very sort of targeted approach, right? We say, okay, this is a piece of information that's a priority tasking for the U.S., for our national security. We're going to go out, we're going to figure out who has access to it. We're going to develop a very sort of surgical strike to figure out how do we get to somebody who's got this piece of information. That's typically how we or some of our allies would operate. The Russians, the Chinese have always had a different approach. I mean, the Russians is less elegant. The Russians are just throw shit at the wall and see what sticks, right? But the Chinese, they've got this long view, and they've also got this ability. And so in this particular attack that they're still trying to assess, that was perpetrated by, Chinese state-sponsored hackers based in China, they're just going to take everything, and then they'll sift through it. They'll figure out what they got. A lot of it's going to be just, chafe, not of interest, but they're going to find a lot of gold in there too. And they're willing to do that because they've got the patience to do it. Mm-hmm. They'll develop a target. They'll develop a potential recruit for years and years and years. Or they'll infiltrate a society or an organization, right? They'll put a student out here who's actually working for the PLA, for their intel operations, and they'll put him out as an undergrad. And then he'll go to school, and then he'll get good grades, and then he'll go to a grad school, and then he'll get a job, and they'll get another job, and then 30 years down the line, it may pay off. But they're willing to make that investment. So
we should be scared.
Well, we shouldn't be scared, but we should, yeah. I don't think we should be scared, but I think what we should be is pragmatic and understand why. For instance, I mean, there was a lot of, hue and cry over the past 4 years. I can't believe I just said hue and cry.
I don't even know what that means.
I don't know. It's just like, it's old timey.
Is it?
Yeah. Oh, by golly.
What is
Look
hue
at me.
and cry?
It's like the cat's pajamas. So 4 years of Trump and sort of his antagonistic relationship with China, and people were all wringing their hands in Washington, D.C., the think tankers and the traditional pundits and the diplomats of the U.S., the long-term people. They're, oh, my God, we've got this adversarial relationship with China. Well, you know what? We better, right? So that's not a bad thing. So I'm hoping the current administration maintains to some degree, and we'll see what happens. They still haven't responded to the SolarWinds, to the Russian hack. Right, they're talking about it now. They're saying they're gonna engage in several clandestine retaliatory acts. Well, it's not that clandestine because they've announced that they're going to do it, and so But I'm hoping that they will take serious action against the SolarWinds Russian act. But they've got to with China. They've got to maintain this posture. We've got to make it clear and understood to the Chinese regime that we're not going to put up with this shit. They're going to keep doing it, but we got to make it painful for them.
So how do you make it painful?
Well, it's the old word sanctions. You got to go with the sanctions because there's not much else. Trade wars. I know everybody hates a trade war. Not everybody, but you've got to find a way, because the problem with cyber shenanigans is that there's no real clear definition, right? We know if a country fires a ballistic missile off, we know what the retaliatory act is. We know what an appropriate response is. In cyberspace, when you're talking about warfare, coming up with a definition is very difficult and hasn't been done yet. We've got Cyber Command, right? And we're still trying to sort out what are appropriate responses, because it can escalate quickly, right? Next thing you know, they could shut down our infrastructure, right?
Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about, supposedly what they did in India.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could explain that to people, they shut down the power grid in India, allegedly. They said they didn't do it, but apparently there was some sort of a warning about the power going out, right?
Yeah. They've done it. The Russians did it famously in Ukraine, right? Not that long ago. And China's ability to interfere in infrastructure here in the U.S. or in India or with our allies is because for years now they've been probing. There's been testing going on. We talk about. It's a good example. We talk about how. In the U.S., we have 3 grids. And I think people were stunned to find out that Texas has its own power grid. Well, yeah. But it's not so much. People were like, oh, my God, look at Texas. They're terrible because, they wanted to make it a political thing, right?
Yeah.
They wanted to make it sound like the reason why it's so terrible is because it's Republicans and they want their own independence. Well, no, all 3 grids are fucked, right? The East and the West and the Texas grids are all cobbled together over the years. So it's it's like a patchwork quilt. And they were never built to withstand physical attacks. You could drive by any substation, right? You could get close enough to pee on it. And they certainly were never designed to withstand a cyber attack. So over the years, what goes on is essentially a mapping exercise, right? Where whether it's the Russians, whether it's the Chinese, whether it's the North Koreans using Chinese capabilities, whether it's the Iranians, whomever, they're in there probing and trying to understand the weaknesses, and they're drawing up a map. Now, the reason why they're doing that is to have a game plan, right? And I guarantee you, sitting on the desk somewhere not too far from, Xi's office is a playbook that says, if this thing escalates, here's what we're going to do. And if you think like it was bad in Texas, a couple of weeks ago when, the power was out, and it was bad, but think about that lasting for 8, 10, 12 weeks around the country, right? Power grid shut down. What happens? You can't transport shit, right? You can't get cash. Fuel doesn't get to the gas stations. Food doesn't get to the stores. There's, depending on the time of year, heat issues, obviously, water supplies. And that's where the next big battle is going to be fought, right? They're going to bring it to the homeland. And we will do the same thing, right? It's not like we're not doing it, because people always say, when I say something like that, well, the U.S. does it too. I think, well, fuck yeah, the U.S. does it. We better hope we're prepared.
Does that frustrate you when people say that? Well, the U.S. does it too.
Yeah, it does in a sense, because, and this is where I think, now personal opinion comes into it. Look, I spent most of my adult life overseas, and I like to think that I've got a fairly pragmatic view on things. I do admit that obviously, look, I look at the U.S. and I like to think, and I have seen on occasions, we do a lot of things for the right reason. Sometimes we don't do it properly, right? We make mistakes. Of course we make mistakes. But we try to self-correct. I guarantee you, if we're talking about the major powers out there, if we're talking about China and us, if we're talking about the Chinese regime, I'm talking about, obviously, if we're talking about the Russians, the Iranians, the North Koreans, we better hope that we stay up there, right, and are able to exert influence and leverage and control at the top, right? Because if it's and again, maybe I'm wrong here, but the Chinese don't view anything in an altruistic manner. The Chinese regime, right? It's all about self-interest. And sometimes, I'll tell you what's frustrating, sometimes is we seem to be the only country out there that apologizes, right, for that sort of thing. And so when we act in our own best interest, and we go, well, we're really sorry about that. We're kind of acting in our own best interest. Well, every other nation does it, and they don't give a fuck.
Yeah, but shouldn't we be the moral high ground for the world? I think we should. I think it's nice if we do all the same shit they do. We say, sorry.
Yeah.
As long as we do all the same shit.
I guess it doesn't cost anything to say sorry.
It's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
We're setting a tone.
Yeah, I guess that's true. As long as we're also then at the same time acting in our own best interest.
Yeah.
Because we have to be pragmatic. If we think that somehow, look at climate change. That's obviously, it's back on the table. It's a big issue, it's a major policy direction. Hey, fine, great. Who doesn't want clean energy? But to act as if China's not the number one polluter out there is insane.
Yeah,
right?
that's where it gets weird. Right?
Yeah, it does. It gets a little weird.
Giant difference between the amount of particulates, the amount of pollution, the amount of CO2. I think they've tried hard to mitigate that over the last few years in particular. But you remember when they had the Beijing Olympics?
Yes.
And they had to shut everything down because the air quality was so bad that the athletes, it would actually be dangerous for the athletes to perform and to compete.